we certainly in the Community Relations Council really value the opportunity to talk to people who have that commitment to politics, because it is our conviction that really, especially in these times of devolution, that what happens in terms of the commitment of political parties is taking on a really central significance, obviously, in what actually happens here. So the opportunity for us as a body to engage with all of you is a huge privilege, and so I'm delighted, and thank you very much for having this debate today on this theme of a shared future, which obviously we in the Community Relations Council have a particular interest and responsibility for. I feel I should start when I look at you all out there with that old joke about what the Pope said to the Dalai Lama, that you should spend some time taking the sense of your audience before you really speak to them, and have to say you're a very rough-looking crowd. But having said all that, let me say this. We, as this generation, I suppose my generation, in many ways have to stand back just a second to say that the huge efforts, and I know that those efforts were right across the society and in politics and from leaders of political parties, including this one, who made massive strides and efforts to try to bring an end to what was really a truly horrific chapter in our history. And we in my generation have an opportunity which probably was not there in any way for previous generations, and certainly for the generation that just preceded mine. Because we have an opportunity at last to build a shared future which is not based just on being enemies or people who threaten each other, but as partners. And that is a massive opportunity, and it's an opportunity which we dare not squander. And I suppose if I have one single message, it is that we should not squander the opportunity of building a real and genuine open society, because the alternatives we already know, and the cost of threat and fear in this society cannot be overestimated. Just this week, I was watching the BBC reporting that the per capita cost of drugs in Northern Ireland is something like 25 to 30% higher than it is in England. And that the particular costs of sleeping pills and tranquilizers are the particular drugs in which we have a terrible lead. And in the report, the BBC acknowledged that this had something to do with the real human ongoing legacy of trauma, of terror, and of the things that people have to live with every day. So when people talk about peace as if it's some kind of nice harmonic hum, and there's a tendency for it all to go down into that happy-clappy end of the equation, let me just say that actually, in real terms, what it is we cannot, in my view, as a moral and political community, allow that kind of life and that kind of dependency to go on without trying to do something about it. In the Community Relations Council, we have every day to do with the victims of violence. And I have to say that when we're standing, or I am having to stand in front of people like that, I am absolutely aware that the Community Relations Council has very little to say except, against the backdrop of what you've been through, what can we do to make sure, first of all, that it doesn't happen again, and second of all, to do justice to the care that needs to be given, and third of all, to acknowledge that some people pay an enormously heavy price for what went on here. Because when I'm talking about a shared future, I'm also talking about the possibility to address the legacy of the past. And that means a whole lot of things. It means committing, and not in the short term, to the care of the victims. It means dismantling some of the structures that build up here in the context of threat, particularly where communities become dependent, if you like, and interdependent with types of behaviour, and particularly paramilitary organisations, which can have no place in a long-term democratic society. We have an opportunity here to embrace an open and tolerant, culturally diverse society. No longer defining ourselves simply as not them, but as us. Moving beyond even just tolerance and respect to a possibility, maybe, of generosity and welcome. And above all, dismantling the notion that threat and fear is an okay way to live. We in Community Relations Council did a piece of research work, two pieces of research work that have always stuck with me. One looked at Protestant communities in border areas. And the stories that came out of that talked about people who were unable to leave their houses or felt unable to go into their village to participate in ordinary, everyday activities out of sheer threat and terror. And that went on for years. We also did a piece of work about Catholic communities living in minorities, people saying they dared not hang out their washing for fear that their windows would be put in their village, because things that the sporting affiliations they had would cost them. I don't think any of that is acceptable in the kind of future that any of us want. And I don't believe that we should turn the opportunity that we have now, turn away from the opportunity we have now, without making sure that that kind of threat and that kind of fear is absolutely unacceptable going on in the future. So having said that, having talked about the backdrop and the legacy, let's talk about what the opportunity is for the future. We have a chance and we have the necessity now to build a modern and open economy. But let me tell you this, we will not be able to attract investment if this is a place where people are worried about the long-run stability of their investment. The policy of community of cohesion, sharing and integration is not just a soft, touchy-feely policy. It is an insistence that we create the conditions that investment becomes something which might be possible and even desirable. In modern economies, the key issue is, are you attractive? Attractive for investors and attractive for the brightest and best people to come. We need to build a society which is attractive for people who want to invest here if we're ever to get out of the public sector dependency, which has been, at one level, both the answer to the fact that our economy was being destroyed, but at the same time is now our curse because we can't go on with it. And so if we're serious about building an investment-led economy, we have to talk about how we create a shared, open society. These are not either-ors, these are both ands. Can I say as well that if we want the brightest and best of our children to stay here and to return here, this needs to be a place worth living in. Too many of the people I meet tell me that they tell their children you'd be better off working and living somewhere else. And I think that if that's a message which even flickers through our mind, we should consider we have to change the environment and the context of this place. Because I know that many of the people in this room know that many of their children are going to go, and that they cannot hand over heart say this would be a better place for you to come. So again, a cohesion, sharing and integration policy has nothing to do with touchy-feely softness. It has to do with the core interests of every family in this place. The third thing is, if we are to become a bright and attractive place, our universities need to be places which attract some of the brightest and the best and the entrepreneurs and all of those people who might, in the end, build the kind of industry which has long-run stability. I remember in 2005, and I have had a hand in trying to mediate something which went badly wrong on White Rock Road in major riots in 2005. And following that, I was told that the universities experienced a reversal in the increase in the number of people who wanted to come here and study as postgraduate students. You know, these events, which we measure in terms of how much it costs the police, have huge costs, not just in the short run, And not just in the threat that is intimidation of police officers, which is bad enough, or in even the costs. And this year's Ardoin riot cost somewhere in the region of £2 million over 3 days. But in the long run damage it does to the reputation of a place like this as a place worth coming to. Now I know that my previous chair, Eamon McCarthy, got into big trouble this week for saying that nobody was coming for the Olympics because of the reputation of Northern Ireland, and I don't want to get into the same trouble. And I want to say that he's onto something. He's onto something, which is that it certainly does us no good if our reputation is as a basket case in which you put yourself and your people at risk. And so doing things to ensure that we never go back, doing things to ensure this is an open and tolerant place, doing things to ensure that we have law and we don't go back to paramilitarism as the only way to defend communities, doing things to tackle the sense of enmity and not being partners isn't just an added-on extra. It's part of getting us to where we have to go to. And I suppose to say that, I want to say that we have to end the idea, somehow or other, that the only way we can be safe is by keeping the others out. And part of that is a new pact that purely political means is the only way forward. That we will protect each other's rights now to go where we want to go. To say, as long as it's peaceful, what we want to say. To wear what we have to wear. And to play the sports and to do the things that everybody wants to do. If we're not able to do that, I have to say, essentially we commit ourselves in the long run to living behind walls, to having to put additional money behind security, to having to always have twice the number of police officers than you need for constabularies in England or for people south of the border, in order just to have basic public safety. These things are not cost-free activities. The cohesion sharing and integration strategy is not just something which should be desirable but not essential, but absolutely at the core of a programme to say this is an open, fair, tolerant and welcoming society that we all want. And when people say to me, you know, we want to tackle poverty, I want to say this. The truth is that the people who pay the most in this society for sectarianism are the poorest. That's the bottom line. Anybody with get up and go, if they have a choice, gets up and goes. If what it means is if your only option is to live up against the wall and to live with people threatening your house and your livelihood. Getting investment into some of the most difficult parts of Northern Ireland is impossible. If it would mean that people would have to travel and be in fear of their lives in going to their jobs. So these things aren't, again, either-ors. Tackling these issues is part of building a society in which we can begin to tackle poverty. So again, getting investment, building a fair and open society, and tackling poverty, core goals of any democratic society, all depend on us beginning to connect these things to tackling the issues that are in the past in Northern Ireland. So, having said all of that, I suppose what it looks to me like, what does success look like? Success in the end looks like, first of all, that people feel free to be who they are, to be able to engage in economic and social activity as they wish, and to be able to live, work and play anywhere in this society in a free and open way. And policy towards that needs to be understood as taking the opportunity of now. Because if we miss this opportunity and slip back, it won't come easily again. Because the sense of depression that will sink on this place will be nearly terminal. So let me say this, the cohesion sharing and integration strategy is therefore for the Community Relations Council a matter of extreme importance, and it needs to be thought through. It needs to build on what has already been achieved, And it needs to assert, without doubt, that the future here is shared. That apartheid has never yet been benign if it has to be patrolled and people have to be kept out. It is simply not right that if somebody moves into a house and they are of the wrong sort, and people stand outside their door and put them out, that our only response is still that we move the person that's intimidated and aren't able to protect them against the people who are trying to put them out. It won't do for a democratic society to rest with that and to pretend that everybody just wanted to be apart. Actually, that wasn't the case. And we need to be honest with ourselves. These are serious matters. So what we want the Community Relations Council is to ensure that this opportunity with CSI is not missed, that we don't get a weak policy, that we get a policy which says this must address a new notion of community safety. We have to connect this to economics. We have to connect this to what we're going to do about housing. We have to connect this to the future of education. We have to connect this to the future of what we're going to do around all the cultural disputes that are still there. And that this executive needs to make sure that we don't miss this possibility by simply waving through a weak policy, but we use this as an opportunity to build a coherent policy which ties up all the rest of the issues that have to be tackled. So let me say this won't be achieved unless there is the commitment of all the political parties to put change in terms of the past and in terms of enmity behind us, to take the opportunity of now to acknowledge the issues, to recognise, as we do, this isn't going to happen overnight, that it happens against the backdrop of enormous fear and threat, but that that's not an excuse not to do something about it, and that we need to get something more than just words and warm ideas, but serious policy onto the agenda so that people here and the next generation know that a shared future isn't just an aspiration, but is actually something which we talk about across the globe as an achievement. Thank you very much.